Hugo's hands were shaking. He had managed to finish fixing the mechanical man. The only thing he had needed was the key. The original key had been lost in the fire, and all the other keys he found around the station and in the wind-up toys from the booth didn't fit. But when he saw the key around Isabel's neck, he knew right away it would work, and now he had it. He put the key in the heart-shaped hole in the middle of the mechanical man's back. He had been right. It fit perfectly. Hugo's mind raced. At last, the time had come for him to get the message he had been waiting for. But just as Hugo began to turn the key, he heard his door rattle. Before he could cover the mechanical man, the door burst open. Hugo didn't have time to scream as a dark figure lunged at him, knocked him to the ground and landed on top of him. His head banged painfully up against the floorboards. "You stole my key!" "What are you doing here? You weren't supposed to be here," Hugo yelled. "Why would you steal my key after I helped you? I got your notebook for you. I was going to give it to you. I just wanted you to promise to tell me about it. I should burn your notebook myself." "Get out of here," Hugo hissed into Isabel's face. "You're ruining everything. Get off me." Using all his strength, he pushed her off and forced her towards the door, trying to get her out. But Isabel fought back. Soon she had Hugo pushed back down to the floor and was using her knee to keep him there. He yelped in pain, and she grabbed his wrist and pinned his arms to the floor. They were both breathing heavily. "What is this place?" she said. "Who are you?" The candlelight was reflected brightly in her fierce black eyes. "It's a secret. I can't tell you anything." "It's not a secret anymore. I'm here. Now tell me what this place is." She jabbed him with her knees, which hurt. "This is where I live," Hugo spat back at her. Isabel didn't budge. "Isn't that what you wanted to know? Well, now you know." Quietly, Isabel said, "Why should I believe you? You're a liar and a thief. Where is my key?" In the candlelight, Isabel hadn't yet seen the mechanical man sitting nearby. Hugo struggled beneath her, but it was no use. Isabel looked around for the first time. Finally, she saw it. She slipped off Hugo so she could get closer to the automaton, but she kept hold of one of Hugo's wrists. "That's what's drawn in your notebook." She looked back to Hugo. "What's going on?" The imaginary gears in Hugo's head began to turn. "My father made it before he died," Hugo lied. "Why would my key fit into your father's machine? That doesn't make any sense." Hugo hadn't thought of that. "I don't know," he said. "I just knew your key would fit when I saw it." "So you stole it," said Isabel. "I didn't know how else to get it," Hugo said. "You could have asked." Isabel wiped her hair away from her face with her one free hand. "What happens when you wind it up?" she asked. "I don't know. I've never had the key before." "Well, don't just sit there," she said to him. "Turn it." "No," said Hugo. "What do you mean, no?" I want to be myself when I turn it." Isabel looked at Hugo. She was clearly still angry. Letting go of his wrist, she pushed him back, grasped the end of the key, and turned it several times herself. Hugo yelled out, but it was too late. "It needs ink," he said. He quickly opened a bottle nearby and put a few drops in the tiny bottle in the automaton's hand. The children watched as the clockwork gears and levers inside the man began to engage. They whirred and turned and spun. Hugo's heart raced. He didn't care anymore that Isabel was sitting next to him. It didn't matter at all. The only thing that mattered now was the message. A cascade of perfect movements with hundreds of brilliantly calibrated actions coursed through the mechanical man. The key tightened a spring connected to a series of gears that extended down into the base of the figure. There, the last gear turned a series of brass discs with precisely cut edges. Two little hammer-like contraptions came down and trailed along the edges of the notched discs, rising and falling as the discs steadily turned. The action set in motion by the little hammers were then translated back up through a series of rods that led into the man's torso. There, the moving rods silently turned other mechanisms in the shoulder and the neck. The shoulder affected the elbow, and as the elbow engaged, it sent other movements in a chain reaction down into the wrist and finally the hand. Hugo and Isabel watched, wide-eyed in wonder, as very cautiously the man's miniature hand began to move. Isabel and Hugo held their breath. The mechanical man dipped the pen into the ink and began to write. The children tried desperately to read it, but there were no letters, no words, no sentences, just random, disconnected markings. The mechanical man wasn't writing anything. Hugo almost took the pen out of its hand because he was so upset. The automaton was not fixed. There must have been something Hugo had missed. He had failed. Give me my notebook, Hugo said fiercely to Isabel. Isabel, startled by his intensity, reached into her pocket and handed it to him. He quickly grabbed the notebook out of her hands and did what he wanted to do for a long time. Feverishly, he checked his work against his father's drawings. He had done everything right. It should be working. Suddenly, Hugo felt stupid for thinking he could fix it, and especially for imagining there would be a letter from his father waiting for him. All his work had been for nothing. Hugo felt broken himself. He stalked off to a dark corner of the room, put the notebook down on the shelf, and buried his head in his hands. But the mechanical man didn't stop what it was doing. It kept dipping the pen into the ink and making more scratches on the paper. Isabel stayed where she was, watching as these markings accumulated on the page, one after the other. The mechanical man's movements were so lifelike that its head even turned towards the inkwell as it dipped the pen for more ink. And then something incredible happened. Isabel gasped. Hugo turned to look at her and then ran over. He saw it immediately. The mechanical man hadn't just been scribbling. The lines were all coming together, like something in the distance, moving into focus. The mechanical man hadn't been writing. It was drawing. It created an image that Hugo recognised immediately. Shivers ran down his spine. That brings us to the end of the story. Now you know how the mysterious drawing I mentioned at the beginning of this book came to be discovered. It had been hidden inside the clockworks of a well-loved machine, waiting to be released by the turn of a stolen key. Here the curtain closed, and we can fade to black. But another story begins, because stories lead to other stories, and this one leads all the way to the moon.